Do you want to raise quail for meat and eggs and may not have the room for chickens? Hello YouTube, my fellow homesteaders. We're talking quail today, guys. We're going to go over the basics that you need to get into them, and maybe you don't have the space requirements for chickens, or you may have a town ordinance or an HOA that is restricting you from keeping chickens. These guys may be able to skate by under the radar. Not telling you to break the law, but just saying, not a lot of towns have ordinances against caged quail. So let's get right into the basics of what you're going to need to know in order to start keeping quail yourselves. Number one, guys, you're going to need to source your quail from somewhere. There are a couple of vendors that may ship live chicks, but quail are pretty fragile, and shipping them could have high mortality rates. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to source from local people. There's a lot of good groups on Facebook, whether it's livestock or homesteading, that you can network with people and find people that are already growing quail in your area and link up with them and possibly be able to purchase. Other routes would be to get on eBay or Etsy. I even think Amazon sells hatching eggs. So you have a lot of different variations of where you can source your quail from. You just need to go about finding the right spots and make sure that these people have good reviews if you're ordering hatching eggs. You want to aim for at least a 55 to 65% hatch rate when you are hatching yourself. So if you're going to hatch, if that's the route you're going, you're obviously going to need an incubator, and you need something that has humidity control as well as egg turning for the first 15 days. That's usually when I lock down my quail. In an incubator, you want to be able to make sure that you could house the amount of eggs that you are going to be hatching. They take about 17 to 19 days to hatch out, and you're going to need to put all of the eggs that you order in there at once because they only have a shelf life of 10 days once they're collected to go into an incubator. Let's get on to our next step. Is going to be food and water. So guys, quail are messy eaters. You have a variety of different feeder systems that you can use. This is one I bought from Tractor Supply. It's got 16 holes, I believe, on either side of this. What I do is I try not to fill this up too high because the quail will pick around and find what they want to eat and throw the food everywhere for things that they do not want to eat, and they just make a mess. And for waterers, also, this is another Tractor Supply special. It's a 1 quart screw-on jar. It's called the Little Giant. These are great little waterers. Pro tip for this, guys, go to a Dollar General, get yourself a toilet brush, because when you go to clean them, I clean mine about once a week, this fits right down inside. You're able to scrub it out. If there's any algae growth or anything gross in there, you could scrub it with this. Super convenient, super easy to do. Really does not take more than about 30 seconds to clean that. Same with these feeders. They will poop in them, so if you want, I usually feed my quail in the morning, let them eat. About noon you can take this out, or just scooch it over to the side where they're not normally going to be. Hopefully they don't poop into the feeders. But these animals produce a lot of poop. Let me show you.
We're going to be voicing this part over, guys. We had a lot of wind noise. So right here I'm talking about the 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch galvanized hardware cloth. It allows the manure to drop through. It also allows good ventilation and keeps any pests like mice or rats out. On this section over here on the right, it's a hardwood floor, which gives the birds an escape from this metal mesh floor, and that will help them to not develop any problems like bumblefoot. Honestly, these birds don't live long enough to develop it, but just in case that's something that you want to be aware of, that's what I do. You can also use a garden hoe to scrape out any manure during cleanup.
Now with my specific build, I opted to use an oil drip pan to pull out. I cleaned this yesterday and it's already packed with manure and some spent feed. Unfortunately, these birds, like I said, are very wasteful, so they are going to be wasting. Another option of feeder that you can go with is just a little Tupperware. I use a 1-inch hole saw on this. They can become fragile and crack over time, but just make sure you go slow when you are drilling these holes. And what I tend to do is I put a rock in here, just because when it does get low, sometimes they get food aggressive and they will have their heads in there and they'll all be fighting to get the last little bits. But that rock just keeps it nice and anchored down for the most part. And when you are going to fill this up, just make sure you don't fill it to the line or to the hole. Just give them, they'll have enough room to poke their head in there and peck around and get what they want without hopefully wasting too much of the feed. I find that the Tupperware feeders usually work a lot better when you have a smaller amount of quail. So housing these guys can be pretty simple. If you are good with your hands and you have the proper tools, you could build something like this for under $100. I use one sheet of corrugated metal up on the top. I rip 2x4s down so I don't pay the extra money on 2x2s. So I ripped my 2x4s down to 2x2s. I create 1.5 inch gaps for my oil drip pan so I could slide out the manure trays just like this. I usually clean them out once or twice a week depending on how many quail I have in each level. And I use pallet wood. I just rip it down and create my outer shell for the walled off area to keep them out of the wind and the rain. That is one thing that you're going to want to do, guys, is you're going to want to make sure that your quail have a spot to escape the elements. If they get wet, they really don't do that well. Same thing with the wind. Although they can get down to -15 Fahrenheit, I'll put that somewhere on the screen in Celsius. It just gives them a little bit of a covey to sort of like just get in there and warm up if they need to. Just a little bit of information for you guys. So quail do something that's called popping, and they literally, it's exactly how it sounds. They pop and go straight up when they get scared by a predator or if someone startles them. In order to stop them from breaking their own necks when they do this, guys, you have to have your height of your ceiling under 1 foot. And if you're going to go over 1 foot, it has to be over 6 feet. So between 1 foot and 6 foot high, if they pop, they run the risk of snapping their own necks. That's definitely not fun if you were to come over to your cage and find a bunch of deceased quail. So just want to throw that in there for you guys, just so everyone is aware that with the housing, you want 1 foot or less for their ceiling height. I tend to run mine around 11 inches just because they do pop, and you don't want them hurting themselves, guys. These birds are super fragile. They can be hardy, but they can also be fragile. Now let's talk meat and eggs, guys. In 8 to 12 weeks, the Coturnix quail that I have are ready basically for the table, and they start to lay eggs. Some people suggest a 30% protein game bird starter from day 1 until about week 6, and then they'll transition them over to a 16% protein laying crumble. You do want to get the crumble for these guys, being that they are picky eaters. They have small beaks and not powerful beaks. The smaller the crumble is, the better it's going to be and the easier it is for them to eat it. I've used both pellet and crumble, and they tend to waste more of the pellets because they'll get a big piece and they'll say, I don't like that, drop it. It goes through the 1/2 inch hardware cloth, and that's no good for anybody. You're wasting money, wasting feed, and then you might be inviting unwanted guests such as rats or mice that will come and try to get into the manure trays and try to get that feed. Quail tend to get the waters pretty dirty. With these little trays, you could just give them a little rinse and dump, cleans it out. Also, that scrub brush that we talked about earlier comes in handy just to go around a little bit and empty any of the unwanted waste or dirt that gets into that water. So if you are watching this video, you're most likely here because you're trying to be self-reliant and try and grow some quality meat and eggs for your family. Now the meat on these, they are probably around a 14 to 16 ounce bird if you opt for the jumbos. There's different varieties in the Coturnix family. Most of what I have are range Coturnix, and over the 2.5 years that I've been breeding and keeping them, I've been keeping egg size, so I look for bigger eggs that are usually over 14 grams to incubate. And then I also look for bigger birds to keep in my breeding stock so I can cull out the smaller birds. But normally you're looking at a 10 to 12 ounce bird once you process them up for the table. As far as eggs go, these guys usually lay for about 2 years. They're also not long for this world if they make it to 2 years old. So some people choose to artificially light them, and you could put basically a little solar Christmas light around the cage, and that's more than sufficient. All they need is about 14 hours of daylight every day to be producing eggs. The males will go dormant if they do not have the proper lighting, so the eggs that you may get towards the winter months they are not going to be fertilized. I found this out from experience, and you might waste 17 days trying to incubate eggs that are not fertile. So keeping that daylight hours up is definitely vital if you're going to try to breed and produce quail all year round. Now, being that these birds are manure machines, you're going to need a spot in your yard, or if you don't want to compost it, you're going to just toss it in the trash. Now, another thing that you can do, little tip, is you could sell the manure to gardeners that may have composts, and it will keep a compost pile between 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit in the wintertime. It keeps my compost hot all winter long, all summer long. It's super high in nitrogen, so you want to make sure that if you are going to use it for gardening, you compost it down sufficiently first. Also, any manure, according to the USDA, to be an organic, has to be in a compost pile between 140 to 155 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 days and turn 5 times in those 15 days. Just a little tidbit. So they say quail tend to eat anywhere from a ½ ounce to an ounce a day. In my experience, I've found that they really eat more like an ounce to an ounce and a half per day. That's just definitely something to be aware of, and they will be wasting some feed. Depending on the feeder setup that we go with, they'll waste a little bit less. You could always fill it a little under where you need it, give them that competition. They'll be more likely to eat the food instead of waste the food, especially if they're packed in a bit tighter. As far as how tightly you should pack them in, this is a 4 foot long by 2 foot wide area. I have a 1 foot by 2 foot for their enclosed area and a 3 foot by 2 foot for their open area. According to my Shire farm, he tends to pack in quail 3.5 per square foot. I really don't like to go over 2.25, so on my top here I go with, I think I have up to 18, so I'll have 3 males and 15 hens. That's another thing we should really talk about as well, is your hen to rooster ratio. If you are looking to hatch and maintain all of these birds and keep them constantly hatching out and replenishing your stock, you want 4 to 5 hens for 1 rooster. The reason being is they can get aggressive or territorial when there's too many of them or too many roosters. If you hear they're doing their little covey call right there. They say that that's a call that they make when they lay an egg, so we'll see. Did somebody just lay an egg? I don't think so. They're just chatting with us right now because we're over here. So 4 to 5 hens. I tend to keep 5 hens per rooster. I usually have pretty good fertile rates. I usually get between 60 and 75% hatch rate when I do hatch. I usually take my eggs, let them sit teetered for a day or two, and I bounce them back and forth every 12 hours, and I get pretty good hatch rates. I can't complain with what I'm getting. I think that's all we got today for you guys. So if you like the video, hit that like button. Really helps the channel out. If you're new here, guys, hit the subscribe button. We'd really appreciate having you come around, learn how to farm, ask questions. Please let me know if you guys have questions down in the comments. I'm going to put a video link either here or here about the things that I wish I knew before I got quail. I'll catch you guys on the next one. So wherever you're at, have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, and I'll see you guys soon.